My friends to the darkest corners. Today tales. We are venturing to the Appalachian Mountains. Please enjoy. If you like, please hit the like button and the hype button. Please subscribe. And if you dislike, please hit the dislike button. All interactions with the channel helps me grow. Get members. And I do appreciate it a lot. Thank you. Have a great week. Title: The Root Wife of Blackberry Holler. Part 1. The Law of the Holler. There are places in the Appalachian Mountains that aren't on any GPS. You find them by taking a wrong turn off a logging road, then another until the asphalt gives way to red clay and the trees start leaning in like they're trying to hear your heartbeat. My family has lived in one of these blind spots for 6 generations. We don't talk to the townies, and we don't go to the doctor. If you got a cough, you brewed pine needle tea. If you got a break, you set it with a cedar splint. And if you got a curse, you went to see the root wife. Everyone called her Granny Callow. She lived at the very back of Blackberry Holler in a cabin that looked like it had been grown out of the earth rather than built. The walls were packed with moss, and the roof was shingled with slate from the creek bed. My mother always told me, when you go to Granny's, you bring a gift of salt and a pint of your own sweat, and no matter what you see in her jars, you don't ask what's inside. Part 2. The Bargain. When I was 19, my younger brother Toby fell ill. It wasn't a normal fever. His skin turned the color of wet river stones, and his eyes started darting around like there were flies trapped behind his pupils. The local herbs didn't work. The prayer circles didn't work. My father, desperate and gray-faced, handed me a jar of salt and a rusted iron key. "Go to the holler," he whispered. "Tell the root wife we're ready to pay the interest." I didn't know what interest meant then. I just knew Toby was dying. The walk into Blackberry Holler took 4 hours. As I moved deeper, the woods changed. The birds went silent, and the shadows didn't move with the sun. They seemed to stay fixed, pointing toward the back of the valley. I found the cabin at dusk. There was no smoke from the chimney, but the air smelled like ozone and rotting lilies. Part 3. The Face in the Thicket. Granny Callow was sitting on her porch, but she wasn't in a rocking chair. She was perched on the railing like a hawk, her long yellow toenails digging into the wood. She was older than any human has a right to be. Her skin was a map of every drought and flood the mountains had ever known. When she looked at me, her eyes weren't brown or blue. They were the color of stagnant pond water. "Your father sent the boy," she rasped. Her voice sounded like 2 stones grinding together. "He owes me a debt of 3 generations. And Toby is the 3rd. I offered the salt. Nearly she knocked it out of my hand. "I don't want the white sand, child. I want the song." She climbed down from the railing with a fluidity that made my stomach turn. Her limbs were too long, her joints clicking like dry branches. She leaned in close, and I realized she didn't have a scent of a person. She smelled like the deep black dirt you find under a fallen log. Part 4. The Ritual of the Jars. She led me inside. The cabin was filled with hundreds of glass jars. Some contained roots that looked like human fingers. Others held things that pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. She pulled a jar from the highest shelf. Inside was a single shriveled heart. It wasn't beating, but it was vibrating. "Toby's fever isn't a sickness," she whispered, her face inches from mine. "It's a vacancy, something from the old world wants in, and he's the open door." She told me that to save him, I had to go to the witching tree, a lightning-struck oak on the ridge, and tie a lock of Toby's hair to the highest branch. But there was a catch. "The mountain will try to speak to you," she warned. "It will use my voice. It will use your mother's voice. It might even use yours. If you answer, you stay. If you stay, I harvest." Part 5. The Ascent. The climb up the ridge, in the dark, was a nightmare of sensory horror. Every time a branch brushed my face, it felt like a cold hand. Halfway up, I heard it. "Help me. Please, it's so dark." It was Toby. His voice was coming from a thicket of mountain laurel. I stopped, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to run to him, but I remember Granny's clicking joints. I kept climbing. Then the voice changed. It became Granny Callow's. "You're doing it wrong, boy. Turn back. The tree is gone." The air grew so cold, my breath turned to ice on my lips. I reached the witching tree, a skeletal, blackened thing that looked like a hand reaching out of the mountain to grab the moon. As I reached up to tie the lock of hair, a figure stepped out from behind the trunk. It was a woman. She wore a dress made of moth wings, and her face was a smooth, featureless mask of white wood. She didn't have a mouth, yet I heard her clearly in my head. "The root wife is hungry, little bird. Why save the brother when you can join the feast?" Part 6. The Harvest. I didn't answer. I tied the knot, shut my eyes, and sprinted back down the mountain. I didn't care about the thorns or the steep drops. I ran until my lungs burned like they were filled with acid. When I got back to the cabin, Granny Callow was gone. The porch was empty. The door was swinging open. I stepped inside, and every single jar on the shelves was shattered. The floor was covered in glass and foul-smelling liquid. In the center of the room, there was one new jar. It was sealed with red wax. Inside was a lock of hair, Toby's hair, and next to it a small carved wooden doll that looked exactly like me. Conclusion: the debt. Toby woke up the next morning. The gray was gone from his skin, and the flies were gone from his eyes. He didn't remember a thing. But ever since that night, I can't sleep when the moon is full. I can hear the clicking of joints in the attic. I see the moss growing on my bedroom walls, even when I scrub it away. The root wife didn't take Toby. She took the song of our family. Now when I walk through the woods, the trees don't just lean in, they whisper, and I'm starting to understand what they're saying. They're saying my name, and this time, it's my own voice calling back. The Whispering Ridge, setting, Blackwood Slope, deep Appalachia. Part 1, the oldest soil. You don't go into the Appalachians to find yourself. You go there to be forgotten. People talk about the Rockies being grand, but the Appalachians, they're old. They've seen things crawl out of the sea that didn't have names yet. By the time the first humans set foot on these peaks, the mountains were already weary. I grew up in a town called Oak Haven, a place where the missing person posters on the general store bulletin board were so faded by the sun they looked like ghosts themselves. My grandfather, a man who smelled of cedarwood and tobacco, had one rule: if you hear your name called from the trees, know you didn't. I thought it was local flavor, A bit of mountain gothic to keep the kids from wandering into abandoned mine shafts. I didn't realize that in these woods, the silence isn't an absence of sound. It's a predator holding its breath. Part 2. The Mist on the Porch. It started during the green summer of 2018. The humidity was so thick you could carve it with a knife. I was staying at my family's old cabin on the ridge, trying to finish my dissertation. On the third night, the crickets stopped. If you've never lived in the deep woods, you can't understand how heavy that silence is. It's a physical weight. I stepped onto the porch, the floorboards groaning under my boots. The mist was rolling up from the hollow, thick and white like spilled milk. Then I heard it. Elias. It was my mother's voice, soft, sweet, the way she used to call me for dinner when I was 6 years old. The problem? My mother had been buried in the Oak Haven Cemetery for 5 years. I froze. The voice didn't come from the woods. It came from directly underneath the porch steps. Part 3. The Anatomy of the Unseen. I didn't look down. Every instinct I inherited from my grandfather screamed at me to keep my eyes on the horizon. I retreated inside and bolted the door. I spent the night huddled in the kitchen with a shotgun I didn't know how to use. Through the thin walls, I heard the sound of something, stretching. It sounded like wet leather being pulled over a frame of dry kindling. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Long, needle-thin fingers began to tap against the glass of the high transom window. I caught a glimpse of them. They were too long, with too many knuckles, pale as a subterranean fish. The thing outside wasn't just a monster, it was an echo. It began to mimic the sounds of the house. It made the sound of my tea kettle, whistling. It made the sound of my dog, who had died 3 summers ago, scratching at the door. It was cataloging me. It was learning my life through the sounds I missed most. Part 4. The Ritual of the Ridge. The locals call it the hide behind or the pale mimic, but names don't matter much when you're being hunted. These creatures don't eat your meat first. They eat your identity. They wait until you're so confused by the voices of your loved ones that you walk right into their gray, elongated arms. I realized then why the Appalachian people are so polite but so distant, why we never whistle at night, why we never look too closely at the deer that stands just a little too upright in the clearing. At 3 a.m., the scratching stopped. A new sound replaced it, my own voice. From the other side of the door, I heard myself, my exact pitch, my exact stutter, whispering, "It's okay, Elias. You can come out now. The mist is gone." Part 5. The Escape. I didn't wait for dawn. I knew if I stayed until the sun rose, I would see what was making that voice, and once you see it, the tether is complete. I grabbed my keys, burst through the back door, and sprinted for my truck. I didn't look at the roof of the cabin, even though I could hear something heavy and multi-jointed skittering across the shingles above me. As I tore down the dirt track, my headlights illuminated the woods. For a split second, the beams hit a figure standing by a white oak. It was 7 feet tall, impossibly thin, with skin that looked like peeled birch bark. It had no face, just a series of vertical slits that vibrated as it spoke. As I sped past, it didn't lung, it just waved. It waved with my mother's hand. Conclusion. The warning. I live in the city now. I like the sirens, the hum of the electrical grid, and the constant buzzing noise of millions of people. But sometimes, when it's very quiet in my apartment, I hear a faint scritch-scritch on the window pane. And every now and then, my Alexa will trigger in the middle of the night, responding to a voice I didn't use. If you ever find yourself in the Appalachian Mountains and the air gets cold and the birds go silent. Don't look for the source. Don't answer the call. Because the mountains don't have echoes. They have memories. And some memories are hungry.